Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving into something a little different. Something that might seem kind of counterintuitive, especially these days.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about the power of doing nothing.
Doing nothing.
We've got some really interesting articles and research to dig into
It sounds
from
intriguing.
places like Psychology Today, the Calm blog. There's even a piece from Shondaland, the Good
Oh,
Space,
wow.
Headspace, even a little bit from CNN, and a health and wellness blog. So,
A lot to unpack there.
yeah, we're going to try and figure out, can doing nothing actually make you more productive?
Interesting.
What happens in our brains when we truly unplug, and how can we get over that guilt we feel when we're not being productive?
Oh, the guilt. It's real.
So it's like it's constant tension
Yeah.
between our culture that's obsessed with go, 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 do more, be more.
Always on.
And this growing awareness that rest and downtime are essential.
Yeah, it's like we know it, but we don't do it.
Right. So how do we reconcile those two seemingly opposite ideas?
Yeah, how do we do less and be more?
What does doing nothing even really mean in a world that values busyness so much?
Right, because it's not about just being lazy or unproductive, right? It's about being intentional about creating space for rest to reflect, just letting your mind wander without any particular goal.
Oh, like when you're taking a walk or something and then
Yeah.
suddenly you have this great idea.
Exactly. Just staring out the window, daydreaming.
So it's more about,
It's counterintuitive, but it makes sense.
yeah. It seems like when we give ourselves permission to disconnect,
Yeah.
our brains can actually do some of their best work.
Behind the scenes,
Yeah.
the magic happens when we're not trying so hard.
There was this one article in Shondaland that really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
They talked about this study where people would rather give themselves electric shocks
But,
than sit alone with their thoughts for a few minutes.
oh, yeah, it's crazy, right? We can't stand to be alone with our own minds.
It's like we're so uncomfortable with stillness.
Yeah, we've lost the ability to just be present with ourselves.
So what's actually going on in our brains when we do finally unplug?
Well, there's this network in our brain called the default mode network, or DMN.
DMN.
Yeah, and it becomes active when we're not focused on a specific task.
So when our minds are wandering,
Exactly.
and it turns out this network, the DMN, is super important for creativity.
Yeah, self-reflection, problem solving.
So it's when we're doing nothing, our brains are actually doing a lot of important work behind the scenes.
It's like hitting the reset button,
Yeah.
giving our subconscious space to process things.
But then there's that guilt, right?
Oh, yeah, the guilt.
We feel like we're wasting time if we're not constantly checking things off our to-do list.
Yeah, it's like we've been conditioned to believe our worth is tied to our productivity.
It's ingrained in us.
But always striving for productivity can be really detrimental.
Yeah.
It can lead to burnout, stress, anxiety.
It can really take a toll.
Yeah.
Suze Yeloff Schwartz, who wrote that piece for Good Housekeeping,
Oh, yeah.
she talked about how she used to struggle with meditation
Really?
because she felt like she should be doing something more productive.
I can relate to that.
She said it felt tedious and pointless at first.
Yeah, I get that.
But then she had this realization that changed everything for her.
What was that?
She realized that all that mental chatter,
The monkey mind.
yeah, the thinking without intending to, as she called it, is actually a natural part of the process.
It's not about shutting off your brain completely.
Right.
It's about observing your thoughts without getting swept away by them.
So it's more about creating space for those thoughts to exist without judgment.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the easier it becomes.
It's amazing how something as simple as allowing ourselves to do nothing
Yeah,
can have such a huge impact on our well-being.
absolutely.
So how do we actually start embracing this idea of nothing
Yeah.
in our everyday lives?
Especially in a world that's so go, go, go.
Right. What are some practical steps we can take?
Well, that's a great question. And thankfully, we've got some great advice from our sources.
Okay, let's hear it.
One of the simplest things you can do is schedule nothing time into your calendar.
Literally block it off.
Yeah, treat it like an important appointment.
Even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes.
Exactly. Make that time non-negotiable.
And what do we do during that time?
Resist the urge to check your phone, answer emails, anything that requires mental effort.
Just be.
Just be.
What about those of us who feel like we can't possibly spare even 5 minutes?
Well, remember, doing nothing doesn't have to mean sitting in silent meditation.
Yeah.
It's about finding things that are fulfilling for you that let your mind decompress.
Like, even if they're not what you would typically think of as productive. The
Exactly.
Psychology Today article talked about that.
Yeah.
They said nothing looks different for everyone.
Right?
For one person, it might be gardening. For another, it might be listening to music.
Oh, or taking a walk in nature.
And there's this Reddit post.
Oh, yeah.
Advice: how doing nothing is changing my life.
Catchy title.
And they had some great real-life examples.
Like what?
One person said they started spending 15 minutes each evening just looking at the stars.
Wow.
Sounds so simple, but they said it totally changed their sense of peace and well-being.
I love that.
The Calm blog had a good tip, too,
Oh, what's that?
about reclaiming waiting time.
Like when you're standing in line.
Yeah, or waiting for an appointment.
Yeah.
Instead of filling that time with our phones.
Yeah, we're always on our phone.
What if we just allowed ourselves to be in those moments?
Be present without the distractions.
It's about shifting our mindset
Right.
from constantly needing to do something
Yeah.
to just allowing ourselves to be.
It's a subtle but powerful shift.
It's fascinating to think that by doing nothing,
Yeah.
we're actually doing our brains a huge favor.
Giving them a chance to rest and reset.
But sometimes it feels almost selfish
Oh, yeah, I get that.
to prioritize our own rest and well-being
Mm.
when there's so much going on in the world.
I hear you.
Like, so much that needs to be done.
I know, but here's the thing.
Okay.
Taking care of ourselves actually allows us to show up better for others.
Oh, that's interesting.
When we're burnt out and stressed,
Yeah.
we're not exactly the most patient, compassionate, or helpful people to be around.
That's a really good point.
And there's actually science to back this up.
Really?
Chronic stress, it can impact both our physical and mental health.
Yeah.
It can lead to burnout.
Yeah. Decreased empathy, difficulty connecting with others.
So it's like we're actually doing ourselves and everyone around us a disservice.
Exactly.
Not taking care of ourselves.
Think of it this way. If you're constantly running on fumes, you're eventually going to hit a wall.
Yeah.
And that's not good for anyone.
Suze Yellow-Schwartz, she shared a story in her piece for Good Housekeeping.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
After she started incorporating more nothing time,
Okay.
her family actually noticed how much calmer and more present she seemed.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It's like proof that reducing our own stress
Yeah.
can make things better for everyone.
It creates a ripple effect.
It reminds me of that quote, "Sometimes sitting and doing nothing is the best something you can do."
Where's that from?
That's Karen Salmonson, and that was in one of the Psychology Today articles.
Oh, I like that.
It really highlights that doing nothing isn't selfish.
Right.
It's actually an act of self-care.
It benefits us and everyone around us.
So doing nothing is really about so much more than just relaxing. Yeah.
Or taking a break.
It's about well-being for ourselves and those around us.
It's about slowing down and reconnecting with what truly matters.
But it's hard, right?
It is.
It's so easy to get caught up in the busyness of life
Yeah.
and forget to make space for stillness.
What advice do our sources have for actually making doing nothing?
Yeah.
How do we actually do it?
A regular part of our lives.
Well, that's where those practical tips come in.
Like the calendar blocking.
Exactly, like scheduling nothing time and finding ways to reclaim those little bits of waiting time throughout the day.
And remembering that nothing can be different for everyone.
It's not about forcing yourself to meditate if that doesn't feel right.
It's about finding what works for you.
Yeah.
What allows you to disconnect and recharge in a way that feels authentic.
And you know, one thing that can make a big difference is our relationship with technology.
Oh, yeah.
That's something that a lot of our sources touched on.
The CNN article about Nixon talked about that. Yeah, they talked about how our constant connection to technology makes it hard to ever truly do nothing.
It's like we're always scrolling, liking, commenting, checking.
Yeah, our brains are addicted to the stimulation.
It's hard to break free.
But if we want to experience the real benefits of doing nothing,
Yeah.
we need to disconnect from the digital world and reconnect with ourselves.
So how do we do that?
Well, a lot of the articles recommended setting boundaries with technology.
Like what kind of boundaries?
Things like turning off notifications,
Okay.
designating certain times as tech-free.
Like a digital detox.
Exactly. Or even creating a physical space in your home where devices aren't allowed.
There was something in one of the articles about digital minimalism.
Oh, yeah, Cal Newport's work.
It's about being intentional with our technology use.
Choosing quality over quantity.
So instead of mindlessly scrolling,
Yeah.
we could be reading a book, going for a walk, having a conversation.
Exactly.
So doing nothing is also about doing nothing with technology.
Yeah, creating space where we can be present without the digital distractions.
And the interesting thing is when we learn to do nothing better,
We might actually be more productive when we're working.
it's like slowing down to speed up.
It's a paradox, but it makes sense.
It's about prioritizing our well-being,
Yeah.
creating a life that feels balanced and fulfilling.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into doing nothing,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away?
I think the biggest thing for me is that doing nothing isn't about being lazy or unproductive.
It's about recognizing that rest and rejuvenation are just as important as work and achievement.
And by allowing ourselves to slow down and disconnect.
We can actually tap into a deeper level of creativity.
Insight and well-being.
It's like we're giving our minds and bodies the space they need to recharge.
And come back even stronger.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that doing nothing can look like a lot of different things.
It's not just about meditation, although that can be great for some people.
It's about finding what truly allows you to disconnect and be present.
Whether that's a walk in nature, listening to music, even just staring out the window and letting your mind wander.
The key is to find what works for you and make it a regular part of your routine.
And be patient with yourself.
It takes time to unlearn those habits of busyness,
And to embrace the power of doing nothing.
but it's so worth it.
When we learn to do nothing, we're not just giving ourselves a break.
We're investing in our overall well-being and creating a more balanced life.
And that's something we can all benefit from.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that rest and rejuvenation are just as important as work and achievement.
And by allowing ourselves to slow down and disconnect,
We can actually tap into a deeper level of creativity.
insight and well-being,
It's like we're giving our minds and bodies the space they need to recharge.
and come back even stronger.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that doing nothing can look like a lot of different things.
It's not just about meditation, although that can be great for some people.
It's about finding what truly allows you to disconnect and be present.
Whether that's a walk in nature, listening to music, even just staring out the window and letting your mind wander.
The key is to find what works for you and make it a regular part of your routine.
And be patient with yourself.
It takes time to unlearn those habits of busyness,
And to embrace the power of doing nothing.
but it's so worth it.
When we learn to do nothing, we're not just giving ourselves a break.
We're investing in our overall well-being and creating a more balanced life.
And that's something we can all benefit from.
Absolutely.
Well said. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the power of doing nothing.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, we encourage you to explore this concept for yourselves.
Experiment with different ways of incorporating nothing time into your daily life.
And see what unfolds.
You might be surprised at what you discover.
Thanks for listening.
It's about recognizing that rest and rejuvenation are just as important as work and achievement.
And by giving ourselves permission to slow down and disconnect.
We can tap into like a deeper level of creativity, you know?
Insight and well-being. It's like,
Yeah, and it's like giving our minds and bodies a chance to really recharge.
and come back stronger. And I think it's important to remember that doing nothing doesn't have to look the same for everyone.
Absolutely.
It's not all about meditation, although that's great for some people.
It's about finding what works for you, what really allows you to disconnect and be present.
So that could be a walk in nature, listening to music, even just staring out the window and letting your thoughts kind of wander.
Exactly, just being in the moment.
And I think it's also about being patient with yourself. You know,
Yeah.
It takes time to unlearn all those habits we have of being constantly busy.
We live in a culture of busyness.
Right. And to really embrace this whole idea of doing nothing.
It's a shift in mindset for sure.
But it's so worth it.
It is.
When we learn to do nothing, it's not just about taking a break.
It's an investment
Yeah.
in our overall well-being.
Creating a more balanced and fulfilling life.
And I think that's something we can all benefit from.
Well said. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the power of doing nothing.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, we encourage you to give this a try. Experiment with different ways of incorporating some nothing time into your life. See what happens. You might be surprised at what you discover.
Thanks for listening.